that's also humbling too, because you look at it and they tell you the same story that we say, is that, we're sick, we're unhealthy, you've been lied to your whole life, and it's because of, someone wanted to gain financially, and if only this person or these couple people didn't propagate this big lie, then people would be healthier. And so,
Jeremy, how did you find Carnivore?
well, Dave, it's gonna sound like a pretty common story. It's eventually went through keto, and then it transitioned to carnivore, and I, I figured someone should coin a term for it. I don't know if someone has yet. Call it the keto door. It kind of rhymes with ketovore, but that's kind of how it went. I know people kind of start far back. Hopefully, I don't start too far back, but I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 3 years old. Some of those formative memories. I was born in the Philippines, and one of those first formative memories had to do with food. And I was, 3 years old at the time, and I think at some point there was a can of 7 Up just lying there, on a table, and kind of tempting me. And I begged my parents, "Hey, can I want some," and they had agreed to one sip. But they made the mistake of leaving the room, and of course, you leave a 3-year-old in there. One sip turns to two, three, four, and somehow that was, a formative memory. But I just remember kind of crawling over to my parents after that and kind of whining, going, "Oh, my stomach hurts," and but it was hard. It was sweet, probably sweeter than anything I'd had at that point, and it kind of formed a relationship there with sugar that got more unhealthy over time. Uh, Philippines, I haven't been there in quite a while. So this is back in the 90s, and I know there's, they like. I don't think they restrict any meat over there. There's a lot of sour foods, I think, a lot of rice, a lot of savory foods mixed in there, and in general, I don't think they really got many diseases of the Western world until a fast food chain started coming in big. So somehow, I've heard a couple explanations of this, but somehow they managed to keep the carbs in and not get too unhealthy. But uh, that's kind of what I grew up in. There was really nothing bad about meat. But as a kid, you're just a picky eater at some points. My mother was from the States. She was pretty health conscious, and she, best of intentions, she said for me and my brother, no candy. And the Philippines in the 90s, that was actually feasible to do, to kind of restrict that, and she was successful at it. But we moved to the U.S. We moved here to the States when I was 5, and it took about a couple weeks probably before we were at a social event, and she leaves, and usually comes back, and I've got these lollipops in my hand or something, and so that just wasn't possible, just because even at that point it's just so easy to get your hands on sugar that you just become like every other kid, begging for candy, using it as incentive, as a reward, or whatever. So, uh, but grew up, and they still knew, don't give your kids too much sugar. We were in sort of that food pyramid of the 90s, and I know the food pyramid in the States uh, is it gets a lot of flack. I know we got all the pastas and stuff down there, and we had at some point people talk about the South Park episode where they say just turn it upside down. You got to give it some credit, because at the very top it did say oils and sweets and sugars and stuff, and so that part I I did. Yeah, if I had my way, I would just have as many sweets as possible, and like any other kid. But let's see, fast forward through early elementary school, I can recall learning what a vegetarian was, and so that again, didn't know it became important, but it's sort of another formative memory. I was sitting at the lunch table with other kids, and it just came up in conversation. I'm not going to eat that. Why? Oh, I'm a vegetarian. I think it was one of my classmates too. So this girl said she was a vegetarian, and explained what it was. I only eat vegetables, and I just didn't. I just recalled not liking that idea. So I actually recall responding as a kid, what at the time. Well, I'm a meatitarian. I'm just going to eat only meat. And I was so close at that point, 5, 6 years old, to being ahead of the curve uh, on accident. Well, probably parents wouldn't have allowed it, but I just remember too, the girl like got an ally all of a sudden, and like another classmate or a teacher jumped in and said, "No, you can't do that. That's you're not going to survive on that. You can't survive on only meat." So, at the tender young age of 5 or 6 or whatever, there's already this idea that You can't have too much meat, no matter what kind it was. So had that kind of ruined in my head over the childhood. Uh, Times got a little hard, so my mother was very health conscious, but eventually with pressures of scheduling and stuff, I started to compromise. We never got into the no fat or the low fat craze, which was nice. That's something never really smelled right about that. So for better or for worse in our heads, we always just got the whole milk or the as high fat as we could. But between rushing around, having to get fast food, or just having economic pressures, we just more and more we had the candy in the house, we had the cereals in the house, and the soda, and just in increasing quantities. But at the time, we had sort of the misconception in our head that, all right, well, all this stuff might not be healthy for you, but as long as you brush your teeth so you don't get cavities, and whatever else you put in your body, get all the nutrition, all your RDA nutrition that you need, and move a reasonable amount, stay active, and you'll be fine. So that's kind of what was in my head going, pretty much growing up. Uh, and so I'm going to skip ahead then to going going to college, and when you get some independence in college. So went to college, got more independence, and got on the student meal plan, and of course that gives you some options, but more and more I just went straight to pasta, and again, not consciously restricting meat, but just kind of thinking that, oh man, it might be more healthy to have vegetables, but I'm just going to do this anyway. So pastas, and uh, just slowly getting worse, I'd say. Uh, so people bring up movies sometimes. I also recall learning what a vegan was. So again, I haven't watched all your interviews. Has anyone ever brought up Scott Pilgrim versus the World, that kind of live action movie that came out, sort of a video game nerd inspired fantasy?
No.
Okay. Well, the you know the premise is, like, protagonist has to fight various enemies throughout the movie. It's kind of goofy. I don't know if I'd actually enjoy it now, but one of his sort of people that he has to fight has these otherworldly, like powers. He said, I can use 100% of my brain at a time, and and anyway, it turns out it's because he's a vegan. He has these superpowers that basically make him almost invincible, and the only way our protagonist can beat him is to trick him into drinking a latte with real milk in it, and of course he loses his vegan powers. So uh, again, that's when I first heard the term. I didn't look into it. I don't think I looked up any pictures of real vegans because there would have been a disconnect there. Uh, but again, in my head, kind of subconsciously, without being diet conscious, I just thought, well, if I really needed to get super healthy in the future, and I would need to give up meat and just go for the vegetables. So the more of those that I eat, the better it would be. Uh, Start compromising more in college. You start working. Or I started working part time, and so I had the donuts in the office, uh, and some people will say, oh, you have a binge eating problem, but that's kind of tied to secrecy sometimes. Well, and I would just do it in the open. So at this point, it transitioned into, again, I'm trying to coin another term here. We have the standard American diet. I'm going to call it the HAZA diet, and that stands for How Are You Still Alive? Because it was just that much sugar. Uh, so I remember working at a call center, and it was outbound, and I hate being on the phone. I just get really nervous. I kind of had a neurotic personality, and that didn't help. It was not a very good fit for a job. But anyway, so you have the auto dialer on, and you just have this dread, like, I know this call is coming. They're not going to be happy to hear me. And so I coped with it with a Sam's membership club, and I had a big bowl of Skittles on one side, but you get a little sick of sweets after a couple handfuls. So on the other side, I had a thing of pretzels, and as you're waiting for the call to come, just a handful of one or the other to work off the nerves, and it's so you get used to that sugar rush that lasts for a minute or two or 30 seconds, um, and all this time, I'm thinking I still have no semblance of diet really, uh, having any of the problems that were starting to emerge at that point. Uh, what else was there? I got into supplements and energy drinks just because, again, that misconception that as long as you cover your bases by getting all of the micronutrients in that you're going to be fine. So I'm going to pause because I went all the way up to this, this stage of life, and you must be thinking, how are you still alive? And didn't you have any problems with this crazy, unhealthy diet that's worse than the standard American? And there was. So I'll rewind a little bit. From a young age, um, you have I can't recall how you pronounce it, febrile seizures. A lot of times babies get it when they're a year or two old, and they go away. I had those, but somehow they persisted from time to time until I was, I think, 5 or 6 years old. Like it's I think abnormally late, and so we I don't really know why they tapered off, but they did. But we were always kind of waiting for, okay, is something like that going to happen again? Uh, I would, growing up, had, let's see, eczema. That's a pretty common thing now, but at the time it sounded a little more rare. I got strep throat pretty often. I was this close to them having to, remove my tonsils just to deal with that problem. There was, and then I took this as normal. That even in college, I thought, well, everything I've dealt with right now up to now is just kind of part of the normal experience. But I remember going through high school and having the bowls of cereal in the morning and having your preferences of the Captain Crunch, or I don't know, you were probably stuff that's illegal in Europe. I don't know about Australia, but that it shouldn't be a childhood experience. But remembering your Lucky Charms, picking out the the healthy grain part so you could save all the marshmallows to the end and just spooning those up. uh, so did that all through high school, and for some strange reason, Dave, I felt so energetic for about 20 minutes, and then as soon as I got to school, I'd crash, and then consistently I'd crash two or three more times throughout the day, until lunch. You got to get those breadsticks, and I just thought it was like I chalked it up to, well, I'm growing up, and I don't know, uh, maybe bad sleep habits, or they're overworking me at school or something. Um, but all the way up through college, just taking that as normal. Uh, Once I got into college more, and I had, those habits worsened, um, I would get, well, I always had sort of bad acne, but the acne got even worse. You'd have, some people have their whole faces covered, and I had maybe about, a third to half of my face just covered with normal acne, but it would also get to a point where there were these larger cysts, and they wouldn't. They just, sebaceous cysts. They wouldn't go away. There was one actually in, my sophomore year that I remember having like a pizza, very greasy pizza, but it all of a sudden got much bigger, and it wouldn't go away over weeks and weeks and weeks, and it got to the size, like, on my face, of a, I'd say, golf ball. Like, it was really big, and I just thought, wow, I've got terrible genes with my skin, because somehow, this teenage acne is staying with me up through my late teens, and now it's become this thing. So they had to lance it, and there's a scar still. You can kind of see it, but for someone that had self-image issues, that didn't help. I guess having a scar uh, that wasn't earned through some kind of violent conquest. It's something more embarrassing than that. But then I also found that beyond, sort of the normal social pressures and anxiety, then I started getting sort of that general anxiety of just feeling of dread. And I just remember thinking, where is this feeling coming from? Because it's not, there's no source. A lot of people on your interviews, I think, have talked about that, uh, where it's not something that you have to be worried about. It's just this feeling of dread and anxiety that sits with you and just won't go away. And on top of that, what else? Migraines. So had the first of those sort of classical migraines where you get sensitive to light, um, and still throughout all this time, graduating college, entering the workforce, I just didn't think any of it was related to diet. I remember going in for studies to try to fix the acne. They'd have new drugs or new topical creams, and I'd be able to go in for some clinical studies. And I would ask the dermatologist, and I'm here in Omaha, Nebraska. We've got think a pretty good one that's nationally known maybe. So I would ask them point blank, is there anything that I can eat differently that I can do to avoid this acne and improve my skin? And you sort of got to shrug and go, well, I mean, chocolate maybe, maybe some food allergies, but there was no connection in general to a diet. It was sort of like maybe if you're allergic, maybe if so on top of that misconception about nutrition, I was starting to think that all this bad stuff that was happening was just an unhappy, some kind of tragedy of your genes or something where you're cursed with just these bad conditions. And maybe if you can put a label on it and identify it and get the right medicine for it, then it would, someone could make it all better. And I just couldn't figure out what that was. So entered the workforce, and I went from walking around all of the college campus all the time, and being able to burn some calories that way. So you see here. Now I'm going to see if I can share a picture. First picture there is me going into college, and you can see there with a energy drink. Well, they called it an energy drink. It's not like a Red Bull. Do they have Milo in Japan? I know it's really popular in the Philippines and Southeast Asia, but is that
Yeah, they got it in Australia and it's in Japan. Yeah.
okay? Gotcha. So if you look at it, I don't know how you accomplish the first ingredient being sugar, but it's somehow there, and I love that drink. So anyway, but then after college, entering the workforce for several years, sitting at a desk, and you can see, that's one of the rare pictures where I didn't have my forearm like sort of blocking the belly, but that becomes a habit after a while, just because you get so self-conscious. But you're sitting there with a poor diet, and now that activity is gone. Um, I also remember at the time, this is sort of a glimmer of hope, even though I didn't know it. I'd have all these energy crashes at work too. So I'd have coffee, 4, 5, 6 times a day, but it wasn't just with cream, it was with the fake creamer, and then like several teaspoons of sugar. It was almost to the point where the sugar wouldn't dissolve anymore. Like that's how much sugar I'd put in my coffee. And I remember a coworker, um, older gentleman, coming by one day as I'm spooning this sugar in, and this is, I don't know, maybe 2013 or 14 at the time. So maybe he'd listened to Dr. Lustig at the time and talk about sugar, and he just looked at me and said, that's gonna kill you. And I kind of laughed it off, but that stuck with me because I thought, well, sugar can't be that bad. I don't have that many cavities, but um, so that was sort of a warning. Around that same time, I got another large cyst, and this time though it was on the back of my head. And your scalp, as I learned, it behaves much differently. The pores and everything, it behaves much differently than it does on your face. So it wasn't a matter of, a simple matter as it was in college of trying to lance it. It got so big that I started losing my hair back there, and I had to. I probably waited too long for the surgical option, but they said, listen, you got to get this thing not lanced but surgically removed. So I don't know if the camera's gonna catch it, but it's did it catch it? So that's the result of, it's probably a little more hair loss than it had naturally before they removed it, but that's the surgical hair loss that came out of having to remove that thing. And I just thought, wow, I'm in my 20s. I can't escape my teenage acne. It's spread to this other place where you're not even supposed to have acne. What's going on? And uh, again, still no diet advice. I was recently gotten married. We had our first kid at the time, so on top of all the dietary stuff and probably more comfort eating because of having your first child. You have kids, right? So you probably know the stress of trying to make that adjustment. So other weird things at the time would happen. My shoulders froze, and they froze one at a time. So all this inflammation happened, and I realized, wow, I can't lift it. It's really painful. And after a couple of weeks, it was just starting to recover. And I thought, well, great, that one time fluke is going to go away. No, the other one froze up like in quick succession. So uh, that was frustrating. Uh, and then the incident that probably sparked the the change, or at least this start of the search for answers was uh, the migraine started coming back, but one in particular, you've got sort of what you usually think of with a migraine, which is, your head hurts, you're sensitive to light, and you're just down for the count for for a day maybe. This one was a migraine with aura, so it was only aura. You start seeing spots and stuff. Uh, Now I didn't know what an aura migraine was at the time, and this one didn't have the head pain, but I started getting uh, this sort of pins and needles on one side of my body. And of course, even in your 20s, not knowing what a migraine was or what that kind of migraine was, you immediately think, am I having a stroke? And so like I asked a coworker to get me to the emergency room, and we went through that whole process. And the neurologist came in, and he did the strength test and everything. And I had felt weak at some point, but they couldn't really identify anything. It was just this big scare. But I knew it was real because the loss of, or not the loss of feeling, but the tingles and the weakness was there. And then I had some other side effects where I couldn't think straight. And like I couldn't add up numbers nearly as well as I should. I remember trying to play Scrabble with my wife, and I got words just fine, but I couldn't score because just simple addition wasn't there. So I couldn't drive for how many days, and I just thought, this is, you know I got to figure out what's wrong. If I can find that label, if I can find that one thing that's wrong, then they can make it all better, and prescribe whatever it is I need to correct this tragedy. Um, and that kind of, that led to a sort of frustrating search where I'd see my primary physician, I'd see a bunch of specialists, and lo and behold, they would give me advice that was sort of wishy-washy, and say, and kind of theorize, well, it could be this thing in my specialty, it could be a virus, it could be neurological thing, it could be whatever. But I didn't really get any good answers there. My mother was on her own health journey. She had Hashimoto's and a couple of other immune things, so she was seeing a functional doctor at the time. And I tried to see someone functional myself. And I know people speak pretty highly of them. I think it might have been the individual experience, but unfortunately, I got to have a long session with this nurse practitioner, but all I got in return was a lot of I'd say a lot of $4 words that I didn't understand, and a lot of supplement prescriptions or recommendations that I wish only cost $4. And I just thought, like, this is, I can't afford all this stuff. Um, and speaking of finances, it was I was hitting that coming of age moment when I realized that in our medical system, I couldn't mooch off of my mother's uh, healthcare plan anymore. So that emergency room visit and all these specialist visits, I was paying for, with a very high deductible plan for the first time. And so I just remember thinking, well, I've handed over all this money that we don't really have because we're already in debt. That's adding to the stress and the bad health, and I have no answers. So I can't keep this up. So you know at that point, there was only one obvious problem, which you saw from the pictures, was weight. I thought, well, okay, I've gained. Um, I don't actually know what my maximum weight was because I stepped on the scale. I was 188 at the time, and I'm 5'8" and a half, and I don't think I stepped on the scale for another 2 years as I continued to gain weight. So if I were to have hit 200 pounds, then based on the BMI scale, 5'8" and a half, that would put you at 30, which is obese. And if you when you think obese, you usually think morbidly obese, but you look at my picture, and that doesn't look like, at least in the US, it doesn't really look like anyone that's especially fat. And so I always thought, well, I've got thin genes, and if I were to just eat normal, like I would be able to lose this. But um so yeah, had the health issues, had the issue in front of my nose, literally. And I just thought, well, okay, if I can't get answers, let me just exercise. So my wife, very supportive, very, very supportive. We moved into our very first house, and after the crowds were gone, we were moved in. I knew that was sort of the time where, all right, everything's changing. We got to just start no matter how tired we were. So we started just home workouts. I don't know if you've heard of P90X. I know it was big. It's Beachbody, and now they've got a million other videos. But it's we just did P90X with Tony Horton, and we just did those pretty much the whole program every day for how many months. And that was the start of some very positive change, because there was no attempt at changing the diet. But if you're trying that hard to exercise, because it was really difficult, your body sort of demands something different. And so, not by a conscious choice, but more of the fact that, all right, I can't sustain this activity without changing what we eat. That started to we just started to eat a little healthier. And at that point, then that's when the algorithm kicked in. Outside of the more normal interests, you hear a lot of the same stories of, well, you start getting health channels and fitness channels, and some of those kind of go in a toxic direction. But eventually, I got to, what was it, Dr. Sen Ekberg, and he, a big proponent, at least as of 2018, 2019, of keto. And so that was interesting, because even describing it now, all the sugar that I was taking in, somehow just listening to his videos and then some related videos all day, just sort of convinced me that I should cut down on the sugar. And so slowly, uh, just started going down the keto route, and you know cutting all that out plus the extra activity. The In a matter of like 3 or 4 months, that weight just melted away. And I think it was maybe, I mean, if I was at, we'll say I was at 195, maybe, just to be generous, but I went down to 155 in those 3 months. And that, then I was so wrapped up in the weight thing, I realized, well, all these other health things now, the acne improved, everything just got much better, including the anxiety. And so I thought, well, great, this is awesome. And then I started to intermittent fast too. And that was I found I somehow got really good at that. I could do OMAD, or do every other day, or even fast for 2 or 3 days, and I did that on a regular basis. So the weight really came down. uh, and I just remember, though, trying to get the vegetables in. I would front load my meals and say, look, I'm looking forward to this. I, I don't remember exactly what I'd eat, but I have meat, and have a combination of meat and vegetables. But I said, before I get to any of that, I'm going to take a handful of salad or spinach leaves, and I'm going to make out to not enjoy it. I'm not going to put any dressing or any salt, because I figured, if I'm willing to pop pills and to get my nutrition, why not just take this handful of leaves and get it over with, not consider it a meal, and then enjoy the meal afterwards. And so to try to force that in. um, and I was sort of at peace with the fact that, well, I'm not going to, just sort of delayed gratification. You get your good stuff in, and then you can reward yourself. Well, um, so I thought that would be sustainable for a good while, but certain disruptions came. There was one where I got into a car accident. I was driving another big thing in the Philippines, a Mitsubishi Mirage, but in the States, it's a it's a really small car. So yeah, that thing got tossed around when I got hit. I got pulled out of that burning wreckage, and as an aside, I found out it was a bystander that actually pulled me out. So that was a very humbling human experience to be pulled out by a bystander. But anyway, they took me away. They put me in the ambulance and got to the hospital. And that, as frustrated as I was with the doctors, again, I think on your interviews you'll hear it pretty often, that in a pinch, in a life and death situation where they got to patch you up, the hospitals, the doctors, they do a wonderful job. Um, you know, just getting to that emergency room, they've got that little device, that cuts your shirt off with you just sitting there, because they got to figure out. That I have a big regret coming from that moment, though, because they cut my shirt off, and I had a concussion, so I'll chalk it up to that. But I really should have told them, guys, don't worry, the shirt was red when I bought it, and I just didn't get I didn't say it. So that's the only crimson red shirt I ever owned, and I missed that opportunity. But the out of that hospital experience, you're going to hear another common thing where you get hospital food, and that was you know so even being aware of all the keto stuff, I just thought, I've been through an experience. Let me just eat whatever they serve me. And that led to, I couldn't walk for a while, so that just led to less exercise and then more and more compromise. So the carbs crept back in, but I still was at pretty healthy weight, and with the sweets, I'd also learned to eat, the fake sugars. So I always thought that, well, aspartame's bad, uh, and those other ones are bad, but erythritol, these sugar alcohols are fine, which is, I know it's funny in the carb space because you know that sugar is bad, you know that alcohol is bad, and then what do you put in your coffee? You put sugar, alcohol. So I know it's not chemically the same, but it's, you don't, I don't know, the alarm bells weren't ringing. So um but eventually it got to a point where I was just sweetening so much with erythritol, and then I thought, well, I've earned my sweets, so I'll be low carb and I'll have erythritol, and while I'm at it, just top it off with some sweets because moderation. Um, and so the weight crept back on. I think I got back to um, 170, which isn't huge, but it was enough to have a belly again, and it's enough according to the BMI to be overweight. So um, and I went up to that weight while still working out, so I was hoping it was muscle, but sort of kidding myself, it wasn't. And then the anxiety started to come back, and on top of all that, the energy, my energy started to drop again. I have these crashes post meal, and those started to get different. And I think, I never found out what it was, but it by the description from some of your other interviews and some other interviews I've heard, I'm starting to wonder if that was like pre-diabetes starting to kick in just because of all the sweets. But that got really frustrating. So I know I didn't really do a good job of keeping the time scale in there, but we're at to maybe last year, late last year, to where I went into for the yearly checkup, and the doctor said, yeah, you're overweight. So was a little more tactful about it, but she was pretty firm. Um, and that visit was pretty memorable too, because at that point, uh, going back to the YouTube algorithm, I was getting a lot of keto stuff again, a lot of fitness stuff, but then the carnivore stuff started creeping in, and I think your baseline entry to the carnivore, at least on the algorithm, is either the Joe Rogan, which that's not happening for me. I never followed Joe Rogan, or the uh, well, what I ended up getting was like, I tried eating only meat for 30 days, and but it was mostly, it, I know you need like the goofy thumbnails and stuff, but like the mountain of raw meat, and then some shirtless guy like flexing. But I always figure that those people are just doing it for clicks, and they've got a very good physique to begin with, or have, through, not to knock it, but like who knows how you got that physique, but you're gonna say, oh, I tried meat for only 30 days, and I'm still buff after that. Well, yeah, of course. And then you move on to your next trend or fad or sponsor. So I kind of ignored that, but somehow through our network, it just kept on popping up. And so the Jordan Peterson interview came up, and again, I tend not to follow him either. Mostly because I agree with too much of what he says, and so I figure that when he's wrong, it's gonna be costly if I just follow whatever he says. So I kind of approach that with caution, but it was sort of in my head now that, well, okay, you could somehow survive on meat if if you did it right. And so talking with my GP, we had it was a family visit, so I was there with my wife, and my wife brought up carnivore at that point, just almost jokingly saying, well, he's thinking about doing carnivore because he's been seeing all this material on it. And a lot of times at that moment, the description is, all the doctor freaked out and said, no, you're going to die on that. But I think that she'd heard about carnivore by that time, so she played it a little cooler, and she said, oh, well, typically with my carnivore patients, I tend to see thyroid issues or something like that. And so that kind of worried me. It's still something I haven't fully investigated. I know people have brought up thyroid, and maybe you've got sort of a ready response to that. My guess is that the thyroid readings might be a marker associated with low function, that maybe it's not actual readings themselves. But if you got something on that, I'd be interested in hearing it. But it made me approach it at least with a lot of caution. So I said, all right, fine, I'll step up the workouts again and do keto. But at that point, I was by then I was getting so many carnivore videos, and they were beginning to get more credible with actual with doctors like Ken Berry and Dr. Chafee. So then, okay, I thought, well, it's more credible. I'm doing keto already. I really don't like vegetables, and you got sort of that rebellious streak of I still, doctor played it cool, but I still feel like I was being told off and said, no, you can't do that. So I said, well, I'll show her. So um, just after maybe 3 or 4 weeks of keto, I said, well, let me just do carnivore and see what happens and see if it's sustainable. And that so that met with, I don't know, that just met with a lot of success. Especially the first month, just noticing the the energy. I went through the brief keto flu and sort of more more lethargy and kind of energy drops, and that did last for about a month and a half. And I would say that watching all the testimonials throughout that kind of kept me going, thinking, okay, I got to break through this and see where this goes. Fortunately, the GI issues were pretty brief, of just kind of stomach issues. Um, and then also, let's see, had what I'm assuming is dumping oxalates, just because I had these weird skin lesions that weren't I know acne very well firsthand, and I thought, this isn't acne, this is something different. So they were annoying, but they kind of faded away. And so those other problems that were starting to creep back, the acne, the cysts, the anxiety, uh, the eczema, they just started to trail off. I So overall, it was just like keto, only better, because I didn't have to eat vegetables, and the other benefits, I guess, of just stools being a lot less frequent and a lot more predictable. Because when you'd have all these vegetables and stuff, I didn't know vegetables were causing it at the time, but it's just like, what's going to happen this time? Why does my stomach hurt? Am I gaining weight, or is it just bloat? And that never seems to be a question when you're just on animal protein. So overall, it like I said, this is probably the best I've felt in my whole life. I know a lot of your older interviewees say I feel like I'm just like I'm in my 30s again. Well, I'm in my 30s now, so I'm hoping this is how I'm supposed to feel. Uh, but I'm able to work out. I'd say a lot better. I don't think my technique with lifting or anything is anything to write home about. So I don't, I'm gaining muscle a little easier, but I'm not really going for athletic performance. I will say that my uh, my stamina, for running has always been abysmal. I've always hated running, and I thought, well, maybe that'll improve, and it hasn't. So that's just, but I'm willing to live with that. Yeah, and so I'd say the mental clarity, I think, it was more striking, I think, in the first couple months, of just how awake I felt all the time. Now it just feels stable. So I don't necessarily feel superhuman, but it helps to remember how bad I used to feel, and the dread of wondering what's next. Is it going to be skin? Is it going to be neurological? Is it going to be gastrointestinal? Is it going to be, that's a lot of things to wonder when you're trying to live your life and raise kids. Um, so uh, yeah, I'd say that my flexibility has not improved. So that's something that I don't know if that's, again, a technique or just a lifestyle thing. And I I've I've been doing this for going on 6 months now. Still caught the local bugs or viruses that seem to come around. So deal with those, and the question's always there, like, oh, is it my diet? And then it goes away in the same time frame as everyone else. So I figure that can't be it. But that's pretty. I know it's that was sort of a long way to get there, but the I think arriving at carnivore within the last year, or when it seems to be gaining more and more popularity, I think not an accident. Uh, and I'm glad that I'm just glad to be here. If it gets too trendy like keto did, and it starts particularly showing up on the grocery store magazines, then somehow that media just turns me off so much. I go, oh well, here's another trend that's going to be here and gone, and so I'm glad to have kind of gotten to it as organically as you could, I guess.
Well, congratulations. That's quite a journey, but it's good to hear in 6 months you've had such good results. Is this something that your wife is down with? Is she maybe doing it with you, or is she supporting you with this?
She's been really supportive, and I wish I could, I have all these other very specific memories. I wish I could really remember how carnivore even got into my head of actually trying to do it. It might have been through her of just talking secondhand about hearing people do it, because she has her YouTubers, but they're more on the the like the mom support kind of space. And so I think one of the people that she liked happened to be, I don't know if she homesteaded or if she was raising all of her kids carnivore, and I can't remember any names there, but so it was at least in her head that it's possible and it's not going to kill you right away. So when I said I was going to do it, she was hesitant because she was sitting there hearing the doctor talk about thyroid issues, but she was really supportive, and she's the type to call me out. So if something's wrong, she's not just going to try to tear me down, but like we're not also not going to ignore the facts. Like, all right, why is this happening? Why are you getting this? Why are you feeling tired? Why? So it's good because you want to look reality in the face and not really be scared of what could or couldn't be. So yeah, she's been very supportive, and the fun part is you can get so creative with keto, and you think there's so much fewer options with carnivore, but uh, you open up the whole world of steak and different kinds of cooking and cuts of meat, and you realize it's fine. It's that there's plenty of options there, and you can get plenty creative. So yeah, she's very supportive, but she still eats vegetables. She likes vegetables, and I I make comments sometimes, but I'm not going to get combative about it.
Right, and how have family and friends reacted to this?
That's a, I mean, it's it's mixed. Usually, and maybe it's just a part of the world I'm in. With friends, it's it's more of a sort of a passive passive wait and see reaction, or just curiosity, because they have heard of it by now, and so they go, oh, he's doing that, and how's it working for him? But the problem with sort of being this young and not and gaining weight kind of evenly, and losing it, like, people just assume that you've always been fine. I wasn't very public about those issues. They're kind of mysterious. You don't have a diagnosis, and like, no one's really interested in your life like like that when you're just trying to figure out stuff. So they just assume you're fine, and okay, you're trying keto, okay, great, you're trying carnivore, great. Well, you're so it comes across like you're either doing it for vanity or you're trying to fine tune stuff, and there's not really the sense of that you're trying to deal with serious issues. I'm pretty introverted, and my wife's the extroverted one, so we in social situations we work together that way. But the way that it usually comes out that I'm carnivore is that she's just talking with a mutual friend or something, and they start asking about it. I don't really have a way to publicize it, or nor do I really try to. But in one of her conversations, it just comes out. So most friends are pretty accommodating. My kids, they just see it as a dad quirk, like, oh yeah, dad likes meat a lot, and so yeah, they like that. But they still eat pretty much just a, I don't want to say standard American diet, because we do try to limit the amount of sweets and stuff. But they yeah, they eat pretty standard. But I'm trying to set a good example for them, and now, kind of like some of your other interviewees say, they we don't say finish your leaves or finish your salad, which I'm guilty of doing, and I feel bad because I'm sure that sends really confusing messages. But now we've replaced that with, all right, finish your protein, finish your eggs, um, and finish your yeah, meat, steak, whatever we have.
And, that's important, those planting the seeds like that, for when they get older. It's, really
Yeah.
important.
But there's some regret too, because you think, well, if we started off right completely, then maybe we could have avoided some of the stuff because they we see that if they have a ton of sugar, it's not just energy. Sometimes their stomachs will hurt or they get other reactions to it, and that's yeah, it's kind of hard to see.
Yeah. Um, so how are you eating day to day now?
So eating, I try to put it in order of in general just volume, I guess. So it would be beef and then eggs, and butter, bacon, cheese. We have a lot of that. I don't have a lot of it at once, but we just tend to have any kind of cheese around, soft cheeses or string cheese or whatever. I don't usually eat a ton of it, but it's there. I use it sort of just to dress my food a little bit. Uh, Lamb when I can, which is I wish I had more options for it, but yeah, it's really nice. And then salmon, just when I'm because usually I crave fatty kind of food, so I'll have burgers or whatever. But sometimes when I'm craving something leaner, I just end up going with salmon. I figure I get some omega 3s that way. Uh, and then when I have to, chicken or pork or if I'm really hungry, like deli meat, uh, I'll salt whatever I want, and then sometimes certain spices I'll do black pepper or in rare cases like onion powder or garlic powder, but I usually tend to avoid that. Drinking is water, but yeah, I have my coffee and cream, and that's something that seems I don't want to say a divide, but it's almost like the mark of a I don't want to say true carnivore, but the people that can avoid it. So um, that's a yeah, that's a sticky one, because I see a lot of remnants of sort of that compulsive behavior of just wanting it. I really feel like if I sat down and considered it, I don't need it, but I like the cream, the mouthfeel, and so that's something that I'm looking to eventually phase out, but that's just not happening right now. What I did phase out was pork rinds because I like chips so much, and it was a nice transition to sort of have that crunch and be able to snack on stuff. But then, even though I didn't gain weight having a ton of it, I just had so much, and it just wasn't that filling. So that the behavior of just sort of eating something all day just didn't sit right with me. So that I was able to kind of cut out and just keep it to the meals.
And so are you eating, OMAD still, or, are you eating more often?
That's something that was interesting. I was able to, for whatever reason, on keto, I found it easier to fast longer term. And now I'll do 1 to 2 meals a day, but sometimes I'll do three. And then when I try to do a real fast, somehow just getting started has been more difficult. So I haven't done any extended fast since getting on carnivore, and I know there's health benefits in that. So I don't feel too much pressure to, but I do wonder about, if something about the diet makes it harder, or if I'm just in a different headspace now. I don't know if you've talked to a lot of people that have been on both. Is that sort of a trend you see that, it's somehow a little harder to fast, or
Mm,
is that
I don't know. I guess it's kind of 50-50. I would say, actually, just from my personal experience,
yeah,
the thing that I think once you're into the fast, it's not that difficult. But I
sure.
think maybe the thing that pushes me to not fast is just because I enjoy eating so much now.
Yeah.
That would be the thing, really. It's like I've got less motivation to get started, I guess. Um,
That's fair.
yeah, yeah. So, like, how has this impacted you as far as you talked about mental clarity and so forth,
Hmm.
but like in terms of your job and things like that and productivity, has
Oh yeah.
things improved?
Well, yeah, just being able to, not having to work around the energy crashes is just great. And my job is sort of a hybrid position where basically half my time is in the office, and so you deal with those sort of traditional office things, but then the other half is kind of out in the field, and I'll end up walking for almost for pretty much the whole day straight, and so that not having to take a lunch or not feeling the pressure of 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 trying to eat. And that's actually kind of funny because the exception to the difficulty with fasting, I can fast very easily for a whole day when I'm working in the field, because that's it's a whole day of walking, so that you sort of got that adrenaline going, but I can expense meals. And so, you know, and they budgeted so where you can, go out and have a really unhealthy meal out. Well, instead of doing that and getting a ribeye, at a steakhouse, why not get two ribeyes from the grocery? And so, yeah, being able to look forward to that, I think is um yeah. So that's sort of a situational thing. But yeah, it's definitely made me a lot more productive at work, and uh, being able to also walk by the plate of donuts or whatever other snacks there are is also nice, because those used to be a huge temptation. Uh, and this might sound familiar too, but keto, like that sweet taste and the temptation to compromise is always there. And now it's when it's not compatible, I go, well, I'm not looking for sweets in any other way, so I don't really need to. There's no playing games in your head or trying to bargain with yourself. It's a pretty straightforward thing. So that's made work and pretty much every other part of life easier.
Mm. You've piqued my interest now, regarding you said you're walking around most of the time. So what is it, like a support role or?
Oh well, uh, maybe sounded like I was fishing for it, but no, I do reality capture, and so I go on to sites, to buildings, and for purposes of design or inventory, I will take pictures and scans, like laser scans of whatever space we're looking at. So most of the time, I've got a shoulder-mounted lidar scanner, so it's got cameras and lidar, and I just I've got to walk circles and loops pretty much all around in any kind of building. So, um, I'll do schools, I'll do rooftops, I'll be crawling through trusses, and you talk about, I don't know if it's zone two or what, but you talk about low intensity, but just like it's pretty much like a hiking workout that you get for free as part of your job, without that huge amount of your traditional like hazard of some of the harder, more physical jobs. So it's a great compromise. Yeah, it's fun to work that way. And again, after a whole day of walking, like the meal is really satisfying.
Yeah, those 2 ribeyes are a nice reward after that, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
too. Like it's a reward because, like, I could have gone out and eaten out, but yeah, just go on the economical option. Or if you're in a place where you can't use groceries or cook in your hotel room, there's the fast food option. And that's people talk about getting just the patties from Wendy's or McDonald's or whatever, and I thought that can't be healthy, but you as long as they're not cooking using the seed oils, I guess. And even if they are, just taking the bread off and all the other unhealthy stuff, it's I've done that route too. And you don't really get weirded out reactions. I got one person saying from Wendy's that, "Oh, are you doing some kind of TikTok challenge?" I said, "No, This isn't for social media. I'm doing it for the protein." Uh, Now, Wendy's in particular, I hope other people aren't doing it, but they said that they're gonna stop selling the patties a la carte alone, because, and I imagine it's just because the margins are so slim on them, or they might even be willing to lose money on them because they're assuming you're getting the other stuff. But I was sad to hear that, and of course immediately after they said that, I said, well, yeah, give me 6 of those. But and then of course I'm talking to the manager, and he's kind of going, oh, you're ruining my my numbers for the day. But that's yeah.
I've heard other people say that in the comments as well, that they've been noticing that at Wendy's, so yeah.
Okay, well, hopefully, I don't know. Hopefully it doesn't happen at McDonald's too. But I understand, economics is they gotta keep their bills paid. So I get it.
Yeah, McDonald's in Japan, they won't sell you just the patties, so I've
Right.
gotta sit there I've got to sit there taking the buns off and, like, the staff don't care, but the
Right.
customers around you think it looks ridiculous. They're so interested, like, "What's going on here?"
Yeah.
So, like, this is it for you? Do you think there's no going back from here?
Um, well, I think I gotta curb my enthusiasm and keep a healthy skepticism. I think for the time being and indefinitely, this is the way I'm gonna go. Uh, I don't want to get so dogmatic and operate from sort of these ideas that would, I guess, stop me from improving more. So yeah, you know until I see evidence presented secondhand, firsthand, otherwise, that this is the way I'm going to go. Uh, it's I, yeah, I can't think of any other time that I felt better and the weights stayed off pretty effortlessly. I don't that's not an extra stress on my life, and I, yeah, so I don't see that changing. But I do want to be open to if it turns out some groups of vegetables or something are really good for you. I don't want to close my ears to that because it's you get so entrenched in it, and then you don't want to see something different. And I think too that you watch uh a lot of people talk about coming from veganism or vegetarianism. They watch Forks Over Knives or something, and out of curiosity, after being carnivore, I went and watched it, and that's also humbling too, because you look at it and they tell you the same story that we say, is that we're sick, we're unhealthy, you've been lied to your whole life, and it's because of someone wanted to gain financially, and if only this person or these couple people didn't propagate this big lie, then people would be healthier. And so you're sort of taken into the story of like, okay, well, now we have the answer for you, and the only difference is what actually works. So it's the appeal of sort of being on the right side of history, or the right, just being right, and then there's a difference between that and what actually works. So I could have just as easily been taken in by that, and the journey would have been a lot longer. But I also don't want to be blind in the same way. So, but yeah, indefinitely carnivore. It's fun.
So, if one of your friends, was interested in getting started, what advice would you give them to, get started and be able to stay the distance?
Uh, I mean, it's different for so many people. It. Uh, I, I don't want to assume that everyone's going to be convinced the same way, but I would just advise you want to examine the evidence of what works, of the data of what works for you. Um, look at look at your motivations, and not just like, oh, what's gonna what kind of goals are you going for, but really really your deeper motivations, because I'd love for all of us to hit 120, but we're still all going to die. And so if you're trying to put off the bigger questions in life, it's it, that's going to come up empty too. Um, if being part of the community, it's very easy to jump on the YouTube videos and everything, but if you can find someone in real life, in person, that you can that can support you, then that's the first that probably be the first tier of people you want to get around. But uh look at the community, some of the people that are the kind of the bigger voices, and I'd say to consider the platform, because just like individuals aren't immune to viruses, like a social media platform is still going to be subject to the same sort of pathologies that that they're going to be like. If it's toxic on most other subjects, then even if there's a carnivore thread or carnivore community on there, it might have sort of that different slant to it too. So just be cautious, and um, I'd say I'd say most importantly, be cautious or sparing with your use of the Matrix references, just because we we have a lot of those. A lot of enthusiastic groups use it, and but if you remember the Matrix, there's a scene there where the bad guy is eating steak, and if you think about the message that sends, like bad guys eat steak. I don't know. So free yourself from the matrix. Use a different analogy.
Nice. So, how can people reach out to you, Jeremy?
I yeah, I don't really maintain a social media presence. You'll see that just two macros thing there. That was a last minute. I was trying to find something that said carnivore that, kind of like you. It says carnivore without saying carnivore, but that was for a very small scale Super Smash Brothers tournament, and I'm proud to say that I won the first round, and that's about as far as I got. So one mediocre uh, win there in Super Smash Brothers, but we can consider it a victory for carnivores everywhere.
Nice. Oh, thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story. I really appreciate your time.
Appreciate what you do. Thank you so much.